Hey there, thanks for dropping in. I really appreciate you stopping by. If this is your first time here, my name is Dave, and I tend to talk about books that hardly anyone reads. And in pursuit of that mission, this video is about the books that I read in February of 2025. Only read four. I don't read a lot of books. I'm not one of these guys who reads five, six, seven books a week. And there are reasons for that. I know most of you don't want to get into that, but I'm actually part of the reason I make these videos is for years from now when I'm gone, my grandkids can look back on this and kind of learn a little bit more about old granddad when he was still around. So bear with me, or skip ahead to the next chapter. But anyway, so yeah, I don't listen to audiobooks, so I just don't have the opportunity to go through the next book on my TBR as I'm mindlessly droning to and from work. So I don't have that. I really don't have a lot of time that I have set aside to read. I grab snippets here and there, 10 or 15 minutes when I can. Sometimes at the office, if I can sneak away for half an hour at lunch, I'll try to read something, but inevitably people find me and it never turns out that way. So I don't really have dedicated reading time. I mean, I've got all this stuff to listen to. I love watching movies and watching your videos on YouTube. So that takes up a lot of time that I guess I could have been devoted to reading, but I don't. And the third real reason that keeps my numbers low is I tend to palate cleanse in between books. So I'm one of those old fogies that still has print magazine subscriptions. I got 5 or 6 of them. There's monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly that come in. And so in between each novel, I read a magazine, so that takes up those snippets of reading time. And some of those quarterly journals are novel length anyway. So in the end, I end up, a good month for me is typically 4 books. Sometimes 3, sometimes if I handle one of those huge honking bricks of a book, I might only get 2. But all right, enough of the rambling. Let's start talking about what I read in February, and let's start with science fiction this time. So I shouldn't say the first one I read for this month because I'm not going to present in the order I read them. I just present in a way that's logical in my mind, which we don't even want to get into that. We don't have enough time. But the first one I'll talk about today is part of this DAW Collectors series project that I have going on, and this is number 66, and that is Christopher Anvil's Pandora's Planet. That's a Kelly Freas artwork there, I think, cover. Bear with me while I prove myself incorrect. No, it is Kelly Freas. Yep. So this was came out August of '73. Nothing on the back, but dull yellow spine. Now I know Ira reviewed this book, I don't know, a month or so ago. I have not listened to his review yet. I did not purposely watch his video because I knew this was coming up soon. So I'm going to give my thoughts now, and then I'll go watch his video and see how incorrect I am. So yeah, I didn't know anything about Christopher Anvil when I picked this up or when I started reading it, and it turns out that he's an American author from Connecticut. He wrote a lot of short stories, but he didn't really. I think it was only 3 novels, this being one of them, and this is actually a fix-up of several of his Pandora's Planet short fiction that had appeared over a series of in magazines from like late 50s through the 70s, early 70s. And you can kind of tell that it's a fix-up in this novel as well. But long and short of what it's about, it's essentially, and if you've watched Ira's video, you already know this, but essentially it's about an invasion is underway. We join an invasion, a planetary invasion, where the humans are conquering a planet, a low-tech planet, populated by lob-tail humanoids. In other words, they're untailed humanoids. It's not a spoiler because we find out very, very early on that the humans, the story is told from their point of view, is they're actually these guys. They're actually tailed humanoids, sort of this lion sort of type humanoid, but they call themselves humans, and they refer to Earth humans as these lob-tailed humanoids. And what happens is these guys have been very successful conquering galaxies and integrating planets into their empire. And so we're joined, or we join the story as militarily the occupation has reached a point where it's time to bring in the integration, the hearts and minds operations team. And the head of that team is our main character, and everything is seen really through his eyes. And the Earthmen are putting up a pretty decent resistance. It becomes clear that they are, while not technically superior, they are intellectually superior to their conquerors. And so the humanoids, they begin to integrate Earthmen into their strategy and involve them in ever increasing roles of responsibility. And what that does, it opens up a Pandora's box of mishap for our invaders, and they find themselves subject to all sorts of crazy things, from not just weapon superiority, but they find themselves suffering from things like adjustable interest rates, and mortgages, and timeshares. And it's not almost, but there's a level of satire that Anvil is laying on us about our, at least in the United States, our consumerism, our greed, our double dealing, underhandedness. And then, of course, he takes it to another level, a global perspective. Even though the Earthmen as a whole are more than a match for our invaders, we're still squabbling with each other, refusing a common language. Even though we are fighting on one side against the invaders, we're still fighting amongst ourselves. And he throws out, Americans and Russians and Chinese, and of course he uses different, slightly modified words for that, but the meaning is more than clear. You're being hit with a 2x4 of what he's trying to say. So, so that's the gist of the story, and that's kind of, I think, the underlying themes that I'm picking up on it. It's well written. I enjoyed it. Again, you could tell it's a mashup because there are some jarring jumps in the story. We're heading down one path, and then before that seems to be fully resolved, we're on to the next chapter where things have evolved quite considerably from what they were just a few pages ago. So, but that's not terrible. This is a minor gripe. The fuck? All right, sorry for that interruption. Minor avalanche of something up there. Don't know what caused it. Creepos, I don't know, ghosts, whatever. So anyway, I'll just wrap this up by saying, yeah, this was an interesting read. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the minor satire. Is it a great book? No. Maybe a 3 out of 5. It's just something that was it was enjoyable. It was a good read. I won't remember it for very much longer. So, yeah, Christopher Anvil's Pandora's Planet. Let me know if you've other than Ira. I know you've read it, Ira. If you're watching, which you're not. Let me know if you read this, what you thought. All right, the second science fiction book I read in February was The Hounds of Skaith by Lee Brackett, and this is the second book in the Skaith series, Eric John Stark. And you can tell from the cover here that I had mentioned in my previous video that this was not so much science fiction as Sword and Planet or fantasy on another planet. And you can tell by the cover, which is a nice wraparound cover actually, that yeah, definitely more fantasy than science fiction. They're not even trying to hide it on this one. So I'm not exactly sure who the who the artist was for this cover. I don't remember. If any of you know, let me know in the comments or whatever. But so, yeah, this was originally published in 74. This is a 1976 Sphere publication or edition, UK printing. And, I struggle with the second books, or talking about second books or subsequent books in the series, because I really don't want to give any spoilers. And a lot of times you're spoiling the first book in the series. So all I will say is that in the first book, Eric John Stark was making his way north on the planet Skaith, trying to find his mentor, his stepfather, essentially, foster father. That's a better word, and who was captured by the Lord's protector of this planet. Well, in book 2, he's traveling south. So take from that what you will. Now, definitely still in the fantasy realm, the sword, more the sword than the planet. But there was a lot more interesting activity in this book, a lot more action, a lot more tension. We encounter some new, or new to us, human mutations that Stark had only there was only a tangential relationship with these types of beings in the first book. We got a lot more of them in the second book, and there's some ferocity to these fellas, and that really brings more tension to the story. There's a lot more. Stark is involved in a lot more grander conflicts. There are armies this time. There are confederations that he's involved with. There are large-scale battles. Again, all low tech, but it's more developed. There are points when you do feel that there's a sense of peril, that he's on the verge of being truly in trouble. Of course, he gets out of it because there's a third book, but Brackett does a much better job getting you invested in the story. Now, that's not to say that my criticisms of the first book have been erased. And one of the huge criticisms that I had was that it was, you just didn't, you felt like this, like Stark was going through the motions. He was a hired hand, and Brackett does a great job describing what's happening, but she doesn't describe very well the feelings of the characters that are either performing actions or having something happen to them. Whenever Stark is in peril and high tense, stressful situations, you don't really feel that he's stressed out. She may say that, but you don't feel it. You know what I'm saying? She just doesn't do a really good job, at least in the first book and in this book, of conveying that emotional connection. But beyond that, again, it was still pretty good. Towards the end of this book, again, it's not a spoiler, but we do get more science fiction elements. We start to see some of that. In the first book, a lot of it was, there's people in the stars, that better lives, better planets. You all need to check that out. So it's kind of a concept. The second book, it's still talked about as a concept. It's still, there's still something of myth to starmen, outworlders, but towards the end we start seeing them interact more. They're kind of breaking the rules a little bit, and we start seeing some high tech or higher tech weapons and transport being introduced. Now, again, we're not in space. We're still on the planet, but it's inner atmosphere type travel, but it's getting there. So I'm hopeful in book 3, which is on the way as I record this, we'll get more into that science fiction realm, I guess. But for now, it's not bad. It's okay. This is kind of a 2.5. I mean, it's like whatever. I'm not invested at all in it, but it's not a terrible read. It's not. There's nothing nothing that I could point to say that this is a bad book. It's just really not that much of a gripping book. So yeah, this is Lee Brackett's The Hounds of Skaith. Alrighty, well, let's talk some fantasy now with Luke Scull's Sword of the North. This is the Grimm Company, book 2 of the Grimm Company trilogy, and this came out in 2016 on Rock. Publisher I know I've said probably 100 times by now that I kind of enjoy. If you watch my last recap, I was super high on the Grimm Company, the first book in the series. Everything I loved about that book continues in book 2. We're still following Broader Kane. He's still our primary character, which he eventually... There's many characters, or I should say multiple characters with parallel plot lines. Towards the end of book 1, or at the end of book 1, they all converged, and we emerged from that in book 2 with Broader Kane is definitely our primary character. He's the focus of this series. But there are still some parallel plot lines that continue in book 2 with some of the characters from book 1 and others that we're introduced to in book 2. And what's interesting, it's not just a repeat, not just a replay of things that are happening in book 1. There's still the larger worldwide conflict that hasn't been resolved yet. It was part of it was resolved on a local level, but now the conflict has spread, has grown considerably, and so we have a lot of new players. They were maybe on the tangents in book 1, but they're now taking a more active role, or at least more focus on them in book 2. A lot of it centers on Broader Kane's homeland, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying that that's the focus of the story. The overall arch of this story is Broader returning home, or making his journey home, and the perils that he faces along the way. There are forces that are trying to prevent that from happening. There are forces that are inadvertently trying to prevent that happening, by which I mean he gets himself into situations that distract from the main goal, but the sense that he has of right and wrong causes him to make detours along the way. A new aspect to the writing that Luke Scull introduced in this book, in book 2, is now we kind of have chapters that are current, present day focused, and then we have interspersed here and there, we have flashback chapters of Broader Kane's backstory. It starts 30 something years ago, and each time is a jump, or each chapter that is a flashback jumps ahead in time. So we're like I think it was like 32 years ago or something like that, and then we were at 25 years ago and 15 years ago, those kinds of things. So we learn a lot more about Broader Kane. We learn a lot more about his companion Jarek, and their relationship, and a lot more about Kane's motivations and why he was where he was in book 1, and why he feels he needs to go where he's going in book 2. Again, it was excellent book. 4 out of 5. Again, it didn't lose momentum. There was enough difference from book 1 to keep it its own gives its own place in the storyline, and it makes it a distinct contribution to the story. It's not just a carryover from book 1. It's not just the same conflicts over and over again. The themes are there. The characters are mostly there. The overarching conflict is still there, but the individual level, the day-to-day, the action, the pace is unique to book 2. So yeah, if you took what I said from book 1, carry that over to book 2. This is definitely worth your time if you're into dark, brutal, grim fantasy. Luke Skull's Sword of the North, Book 2 in the Grimm Company. All right, let's wrap it up by talking about some nonfiction. I had to get that in at least once a month. Well, no, definitely just once a month. And this month I read Into the Void by Geezer Butler. And this is the autobiography from Black Sabbath original member and bass player Geezer Butler. And this was published in 2023 on Day Street Books, which I think is an imprint of HarperCollins or something like that. Not that you care. But so yeah, this, music autobiographies, music kind of a big deal for me. And so I love reading about the artists that I love listening to. And Black Sabbath is one of my all-time favorite bands. Geezer Butler is one of my all-time favorite bass players. And so I went into this wanting to know a couple of things. So I wanted to learn more about the man, Geezer, and what got him into music. How did he get his start? How did fortune smile on him to make him a part of Black Sabbath? And maybe some of the stories or the inspiration behind the music and the lyrics, because he was a primary lyricist for the band, songwriter. I don't care so much about the dirt and the drugs, and I mean we know. Come on, we know, right? So does this deliver in what I'm looking for? Absolutely. Learned a lot about Geezer's upbringing. Learned about a lot about his youth growing up in Aston, part of Birmingham or whatever. Yeah, there weren't really like dish stories, but there were some stories, some anecdotes. I mean, Ozzy. We all know Ozzy's kind of an ass, right? I mean, not in a bad, well, sort of in a bad way, but and he just reinforces that here and there a couple of times with Ozzy's use of bodily functions to annoy people. So it just was like, man, kind of a prick. But beyond that, it didn't really get into much about the interplay between the band members. There's a little bit. There's no gossip. There's no tell-all. There's no pointing fingers, really. So in that sense, I was happy with this book. There was some level of story behind the music, sort of things that I look for. It's not intricate, not too detailed, but it was enough to be interesting, enough to open my eyes to some things that I hadn't read in a million magazine articles prior to this. So is this something that you would want to pick up if you're not a Black Sabbath fan? Nah. If you're not a Geezer Butler fan, I don't think there's much to hold your interest. But if you are a Black Sabbath fan, to the point, more than just a casual fan, that you're really interested in the origins of the band from the different band members' perspectives, it's a worthy read. I enjoyed it. So yeah, this is Into the Void by Geezer Butler. All right, that's it. Looking at about half the time of the last update, so I'm going to wrap this up real quick and say thank you to everybody who stuck with the video, and just for clicking on it and watching even a little bit of it. I appreciate that. But for those of you who stuck with it, I really do appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you next time. And until then, I hope you all doing well and stay well. Talk to you soon.